we're talking about family today in Ruth chapter 1. We're going to talk about a conventional family first, and Naomi's conventional family. Then we're going to look at the unconventional family. Because increasingly in our society today, there are a lot more unconventional families than there are the conventional families. Read scripture to you. This is Ruth chapter 1, verse 1. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the names of the 2 sons were Mahlon, and Chilion, and they were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. And they went into the country of Moab and remained there. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. These took Moabite wives. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other was Ruth. They lived there about 10 years. But Mahlon and Chilion died. And so that the woman was left without her 2 sons and husband. So this is a look at, the first few verses here are a look at a conventional family, and a conventional family falling apart. We've got a man, Elimelech, who has got a wife and 2 sons, and there's famine in the land. You know, back in that society, it was a very hand-to-mouth type society. If the crops didn't make, there wasn't a grocery store to go to have backup. You didn't have crops shipped in from other places. There wasn't a California or Florida to get your fruit from. So there wasn't these backup places. So if you didn't have a good season crop-wise, rain-wise, maybe disaster came in back-to-back seasons of that, then you were out of luck. So famine was prevalent. We find in the Bible in Genesis that Abraham had to move because of famine. Well, Elimelech and his family moved because of famine, but they sojourned. Notice the word in the translation I use, ESV, sojourn. It's supposed to be a temporary type of thing. That's back in verse 1. They sojourned in Moab for a little while. Now, Moab is kind of a strange place to have to go to. Now, I just say Moab, you may not call to mind pieces of the Bible, but Moab is mentioned over in Genesis chapter 19, verses 30 and following, as originating between an incestuous relationship between Lot and his daughter. That's how supposedly the nation of Moab began. Moab wouldn't let the Israelites, the Hebrews, pass through from Egypt in Numbers chapter 22. In Numbers 25, we find the Moabite women trying to seduce the Hebrew men, the Israelite men. And they were subsequently punished. And one of my favorite stories in the whole Bible, Judges chapter 3, we find the story of Eglon of Moab and Ehud, the left-handed Benjamite. And Ehud stabbed Eglon while he was on the cool of the chamber, let's put it that way. And Eglon is a rather big individual as king. He was a fat king. He died. But Eglon was a king that harmed Israel. He was a bad guy in the story of Judges chapter 3. So Moab is not the best place for Elimelech and his family to have to go. But sometimes families have to make hard decisions, don't they? Life isn't always peachy and rosy and everything falls into place. A phrase I often like to repeat to myself as well as to others, adulting is hard. Being an adult is hard sometimes. Sometimes we make decisions that may not make the most sense, may not be the best decisions, but we make those decisions for the benefit of our family. And I bet you if we were to go back in time and talk to Elimelech and try to figure out why he went, he'd probably tell you, I did it for my kids. You know, one of the things I never really comprehended about being a parent is sometimes you have to make hard decisions for your kids. Sometimes you have to make hard decisions for your spouse. Being part of a family is tough. It's easier to make decisions when it's my way or the highway, right? It's easier to make decisions when it just benefits me. I'm a little selfish. Sometimes in fact, I did this past week. The boys had their candy stash for Halloween. My wife and I had first dibs. Guess I got all the Butterfingers. And I'm sadly disappointed that there weren't enough Heath bars in my boys' candy. So next year, church, when we do our trick or treat on Square, there better be a lot of Heath bars in that candy. Okay? Okay, I love Heath bars and 0 bars. Okay? 0 bars. There wasn't any 0 bars in Candy, unfortunately. But you know, that was one of the times I got to be selfish as a parent, steal from the boys' candy. But there's a lot of times that we make decisions to benefit our children that we don't want to do, things we don't want to do, things we don't want to have to do, but benefits the children. I'm sure Elimelech and his wife Naomi made this decision for the betterment of the children. The kids had to eat. The kids had to eat. So they went off in this faraway land, this different land, Moab, a land where they probably didn't totally know the language and may have been able to pick out a word or two, a land with different gods, different cultures, different customs, but they went. And we notice that the text tells us a little bit more about the family. We know that Elimelech died. So it was just Naomi with her sons. So we had a family with a mother, a father, and 2 sons, and that degraded down to a mother and 2 sons. There's a lot of single-parent households in our community, in our world today. I grew up in a single-parent household. I know it never was totally easy for my mother, especially putting up with a rambunctious child like myself, with a hard-headed sister. And my brother was awesome, but me and my sister were troublemakers. But Naomi raised 2 sons for a while, just her and the boys. In a culture that was very male-dominated society, where it was expected to have a man at the head of the household, she pulled out the single-parent household for a little while. It wasn't easy, I'm sure, but she did it. But eventually down the road, these boys took wives, as the text says. They took Moabite wives, that's the land they were in. They took his 2 wives, Orpah and Ruth. And they lived about 10 years. Then the sons died. The 2 boys died, so it was just the women left. No boys. So the family broke down to even a lesser degree from the ideal nuclear family. We had a mother and 2 daughters-in-law who weren't even blood. And they were to provide for themselves. They were to take care of themselves in a society that was a very male-dominated society. But even more complicating, a little more complication of the story, notice that these were Moabite wives. They weren't Israelites. They were not necessarily racially different, but they were culturally different. Their language was probably different, even though I'm sure Naomi had acclimated a little bit to the culture. But notice that their gods were different. If you look back in Deuteronomy chapter 7, the Israelites are told not to intermarry with these other peoples, these pagan peoples. It leads you astray. Well, look what happened to Solomon. Shift down the timeline a little bit later. Solomon married all these different wives, different countries, different cultures, allowed their gods in, and then the kingdom went to pot. A man who was the wisest, smartest king that Israel ever had made some bad moral decisions. Let these other gods in. Well, these 2 women are from a culture where God, Chemosh, was one of the biggest top gods. So this was a family that not only was a non-blood-bound family between Naomi and her daughters-in-law, but I'm sure there were cultural clashes, cultural differences, language differences. This was well, I hate to use this term, but it was almost like a multiracial, multi-religious family, if you will. Well, I'm sure there's a lot of tension every now and then. This is a different type of family. An unconditional family. Let's look more closely at this unconditional family. Let's read through this a little bit here. Verse 6. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law to return from the country of Moab. She heard in the fields of Moab that the Lord had visited His people and given them food. So she's ready to go back. There's food back home. So she set out from the place where she was with her 2 daughters-in-law, and they went on their way to return to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go, return each to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. Lord, grant that you may find rest, each of you in the house of her husband." And she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. And they said to her, "No, we will return with you to your people." And again, But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb, that they may become your husbands?" This is a reference to levirate marriage. It's even referenced in the New Testament. Jesus is asked about a man dies, or his brothers die, and who's the wife belong to. Levirate marriage essentially was, if you're married to someone, you die without children, you get to marry the next son in line, so that the seed, the line, the lineage, the name is passed on. We find later in the text of Ruth that there's a distant cousin, if you will, even that, a kinsman redeemer, Boaz, that steps up. But Naomi says, "I have no other sons. I'm getting old. I'm not going to be able to produce any sons by the time you're out of your childbearing years. By the time I have a child you can marry. So just give up, guys. There's no hope. Turn back, my daughters. Go your way. For I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, even if I should have a husband this night and bear sons, would you therefore wait till they are grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, for it is exceedingly bitter to me for your sake that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me." Then they lifted up their voices and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. And she said, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods." Go back to her gods. "Return after your sister-in-law." But Ruth said, "Do not urge me to leave you or return from following you. For where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God." They're bound together. They're family. What binds them together? God. Keep that in mind. "Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you." When Naomi saw this, that she was determined to go with her, she said, "No more." Everything should have divided Naomi from her daughters-in-law. There were no men in the relationship. There were no men to care for them. They had no support system other than charity. In that society, they had no way to produce for themselves, to earn for themselves. In fact, when we look ahead in the story, when they get back to the land of Israel, essentially they had to go in the fields after they were gleaned and get up the second fruits, the things that were left over in the field, to provide for themselves. That was their social safety net back then. There wasn't, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, EBT, food stamps. None of that was there. There was just charity. They were up Cripple Creek, if you will. Everything should have divided these women apart. There were no men to bind them together. There were cultural differences. There were religious differences to some degree. But we find out that Ruth stuck to her mother-in-law. Where you go, I will go. Your God's my God. God bound them together. You see, families take various shapes and sizes in our world today, don't they? Every now and then I hear of, so-and-so families, husband and wife been married 60 years. But unfortunately, with the divorce rate so high, I notice a lot of my friends from high school and college, especially even Gardner Webb, a Christian school, a lot of my friends from Christian school have been married a few times. Maybe on their second or third marriage at this point. In fact, I was thinking about a friend today, a man who's was until recently a minister. He left ministry, got burned out. He recently got divorced. Breaks my heart. And that's not the ideal that I find in the text of the Bible. A family should be, two adults and children. That's the ideal for the family. But unfortunately, this broken, sin-filled world, where things aren't always as they should be, the ideal, we find family takes different forms. In family, we have to make the best of it, I think, sometimes. But family can be more than a husband and a wife and two children. Family can be a lot more. We find in this text that family was Ruth and Naomi. Two women, a mother and a daughter-in-law, from different sides of the coin, who worked together and were bound together by something greater than themselves. We find in the Bible that family often takes different forms. In fact, in Proverbs 18:24, there are persons for companionship, but then there are friends who are more loyal than family. Friends are one way that we can have family. Now, I may not share blood with some of my friends, but I tell you what, something happens to me, I got friends all over this country that will try their best to help out. In fact, my wife, her best friend, went to college with us. She is not blood, but she is Aunt Amanda. She is I hate to say it, but sometimes better to my kids than her own blood aunts. Sometimes my sister, better than my sister to my kids. Aunt Amanda spoils my youngest rotten. She's not blood, but she's family. In fact, I count her almost like a sister-in-law. Friends can be family. Herschel Hobbs shared this illustration from his book, My Favorite Illustrations. A family is not simply a group of people dwelling under one roof. By that definition, any hotel or prison could qualify as a family. Whenever I stay in a hotel, I'm not family with the people in those other rooms. Right? You're not going to the same roof. A family is not a group of people that bear the same name. Persons with the same name may live all over the nation and be total strangers. When I tell people my name, in fact I did it the other day, it was at the barbershop. What's your name? Henson. Like the Muppet guy, Jim Henson. As far as I know, I'm not related to Jim Henson. We're not family. It'd be nice if we were, I might be rich. But you know what? Name doesn't necessarily make you family. You can still have the same name and be total strangers. A family can have a variety of compositions. Parent and children, married couple without children, a single parent and children, among others. Family is not simply people, but a spirit of oneness. It is a spirit produced through loving and longing, laughter and tears, shared joy and sorrow, mutual struggle, respect, faith and joy and sorrow, mutual struggle and respect, faith and faithfulness, and a common pursuit of worthy goals. Friends can be family. In fact, one of the greatest illustrations of friends as family happens over in 1 Samuel chapter 18. And I'm not going to read this whole passage to you, verses 1 through 4, but just know that David, one of his best friends in the whole wide world, was Jonathan. Who was Jonathan's daddy? Saul, the man that tried to kill David. In fact, Jonathan even had to rescue David a time or two. But they were like this. They were brothers. Not by blood, but by a friendship that God had instilled in them. That God had put in place, I'm sure, so that David one day would be king. But they were bound together. They were tied. But another type of family we find in the text today is that is bound together by God. Your God will be my God, who said. Ephesians chapter 2, verses 19 through 20, New Living Translation. So now you Gentiles are no longer strangers and foreigners. You are citizens along with all of God's holy people. You are members of God's family. Together we are His house, built on the foundation of the apostles and the prophets, and the cornerstone is Christ Jesus Himself. Look to your right, look to your left. That's your family. Whether you're blood related to them or not, your family. Because if you're a child of the King, guess who's your dad? God the Father. Guess who are your brothers and sisters? Fellow Christians. And as y'all know, and as we've discussed, I'm sure, is every family perfect? No. The families fuss and fight and argue? Yeah. Chandra and I were joking the other day when we were screaming at each other, we were mad at each other. Something like, at least our boys aren't going to be surprised if they hear us yelling at each other. We're used to it by now. Probably not the best way to parent when we do it, right? We're not perfect. But we as Christians, we as God's people are not perfect, but we're bound together by the blood of Christ. That's the blood we have in common. We're God's family. And every family has dysfunction. No, almost every family. If you find a perfect family, or if you find a perfect church, is probably in some place called Fantasyland, right? We all got our hang-ups. But we're God's family. He loves us and cares for us. He's our dad. I'm going to do something that's going to upset things probably a little bit, and somebody's probably going to complain about this later. I want you to do something in just a moment. I want you to find somebody in this building that is not blood related to you. It is like a brother or a sister, like an aunt or an uncle, or like a father or a mother. I want you to tell them thank you. Okay? You've got a few minutes. Go ahead and do that. I want you to find somebody that's like family you and tell them thank you. Now come on, get up. Y'all move. Hey, well, I know y'all, most of y'all can do it. Get up. Y'all need to share the love. You're family. Act like family. Just don't argue like family. Okay?
That's my big brother right here. I love you guys.
Oh, brother.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. Yeah, love you.
Wind down your family, thank yous and love yous. Let me read this hymn to you. Hymn number 386. I'm so glad I'm a part of the family of God. I've been washed in the fountain, cleansed by His blood. Join ears with Jesus as we travel this side, for I am part of the family of God. Bill Gaither, when he wrote that, got it right. Bill and Gloria Gaither got it right. We're the family of God. I'm thankful to each and every one of you that I'm a brother or sister, or in some cases almost like a son or daughter to, a cousin or an uncle. We're all God's people. We're family together. Be thankful. This Thanksgiving season, tell each other thank you. All right? Tell each other thank you. It's a time for invitation. Hymn.